During the recording of the following podcast, no Democrats, Republicans, actors, chemists, dogs, cats, well, you get the idea, were harmed. However, it has been said some have been offended by the opinions seen and heard here. Oh, and please remember to pull clips out of context.
Sorry. I'm sorry. We thought you were someone else.
Is this an all-out war? Public school versus homeschool versus private school. What do we do? Craig?
You need to make the best decision for your children.
End the podcast?
And the podcast.
No, let's talk to Naomi.
She has a good thought on this, I think.
Yeah. Thanks for being here again.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are.
Naomi, and I'm just having fun saying my opinion all the time. That's just who I am. I'm just joking. I'm having fun talking about topics with you guys and love the city of Rochester and the surrounding area. I just think it's a really great place to hang out, to live, raise a family. And we're talking about schools.
You're passionate about this subject, aren't you?
Very passionate about this.
I can hear it. It's like coming through.
It is. It's flooding up. I'm going to have a lot of comments. No.
That's good.
First, just a very special thank you to all who have supported me since the beginning of the journey of just shining a light on difficult things, on hard answers. Thank you so much for doing that. This is for you. I'm Matt Logan, the host of This Matters in Real Life. Oh, hey, stay tuned at the end of this. I'll give you some more information. Full disclosure, I went to a private school for my entire life, K through 12. So that personally is, I have a lot of experience there.
Sure.
I never went to a public school. I never was homeschooled. Good, bad, or in between. That's my knowledge base as education goes, and I would not change it for the world. I would have back then,
Right?
but
That's
nowadays,
what us kids think.
right? But now looking back at it, I wouldn't change it. Terrific experience. The education was as good, if not better. There were certain things, of course, that you were a little bit of a disadvantage. Sure. There's not a lot of people that a public school would offer, but then that's also an advantage. There's not a lot of people that a public school has. Homeschool, I think back in my era was very different than it is today. I shouldn't say I think, I know it is.
Yeah.
The stigma of homeschool back then was pretty rough. And it was very, it seemed like you would exclude everybody in the outside world when you were a homeschooler back then.
Sure.
And that it was like the outside world was bad and evil. And not that that's necessarily the case, but that's the impression that was given, right?
Right.
What is it like today?
What is it like today? Well, it's very involved with technologies, I would say, and so many different ways of teaching. Like I'm very thankful that you can find a curriculum that really suits your kid. You can figure out how they learn and what's going to really make them grow into who they want to be and what maybe their gifting is, or like someone interest in something. And really each kid learns how to read differently, or how they comprehend, if that makes sense. So, I mean, just a quick background on me. You were saying you did the private school the whole time. I did all three. So I had experience all three. So homeschool for my first number of years, and then private school starting in third or fourth. I can't remember now. I think it was fourth grade. Did that for a few years. Switched to public school because the school I went to sixth grade. And I went to public school for several years. Honestly, after I got through 10th grade, I just was done. I had experienced the other two. I couldn't go to Christian school, or private school rather. Wasn't close enough to where we lived. So I homeschooled the last 2 years, and because I just had it. And it was hours and hours and hours of time, just so much homework, and maybe it was just an attitude problem I had, but who knows? But
Teenagers never have attitude problems.
It was just one of those times after 10th grade. It's just like, you just feel, I felt just pressured by decisions with my life. It's a couple years before you're supposed to be this adult who's got their train tracks on the right track.
There's a lot of pressure as you reach that age.
Right. I had a great opportunity. Honestly, I told my parents, can I please homeschool? I begged them. And I think I have 4 brothers, and 2 of them were already homeschooling currently. My mother was homeschooling them. So it was kind of an easy switch for our family. And they said yes. And we ordered curriculum. I actually learned tons of like business management and accounting, just things that they just kind of don't teach those last couple of years, kind of some life skills. So I could kind of pick a lot of electives. So I could, based on what I was interested in those last couple of years. And then my neighbors were, what would you call professors, educators at a local college, and they needed a babysitter. So I would go to their house at 5 or 6 in the morning. Their daughter would be sleeping, and they'd go off to teach at the college for the day. So I'd kind of care for the baby and take my school with me literally across the road. So I made some money, learned some stuff, and go back home with my mom and sometimes my dad to help with, like, if I couldn't get my homework figured out while I was over there. Kind of self-teaching, but
it does teach you a lot of those life skills too, doing those things, because you can balance the babysitting with getting that work done. And you find those methods, right?
Yes.
And then what that leads to is more free time as a teenager.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It was great. I never wanted to not be busy working. And so it just really kind of helped push me through those last 2, maybe some people boring years where you feel like, didn't we do this enough times? Didn't we repeat this class enough? I don't want to waste time. I just felt like school was becoming a waste to me. And so the homeschool those last couple of years was wonderful with the electives. And anyway, as I explained, the babysitting was great too to have.
Well, props to you, because that takes a lot of self-discipline for a 17 or 18-year-old to focus on all of those things and succeed at all of it.
Yeah.
That's props.
She didn't say she was successful.
She's here.
Honestly,
this is the epitome of success.
Yeah.
Honestly, my grades from 9th grade was pretty decent. 10th grade, I went to a different public school. So I had moved from way up north in Minnesota to...
what part, can I ask?
So I lived in Bemidji for most of my years. And then I moved to Delano, Minnesota. And I went only 1 year there, 10th grade. I met tons of people. I was so involved with like the choir and the band and all the sports, everything you could think of. So I was really just maxed. I was just doing everything, before cell phones. So like,
right.
You're busy, but it was I loved that year in that public school, but there was just too much negative, for me that I just had to step back and, kind of just do a different approach to how my life was going to roll out from there.
Yeah. This has been fun. I shared some of my personal, I was just thinking, I've never shared that, I don't think, on a podcast before.
Sure.
It's a good topic to bring up. 2 people, I had no idea that you had that experience.
Sure.
So, and I know Craig has talked about JM.
Yep. Yeah, I went through K through 12 in Rochester Public Schools.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we have all like 3 of them right here. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I really didn't know that. So it's fun how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved and if you do some research online, you'd see that the public schools, they have the funds and the capability to teach so many more programs, right? Like your music programs, the art programs, one of the highlights always for me is electives, because I guess I'm just, into that kind of stuff, but just like a home ec class, and you got woodworking.
I did home ec.
It's fun.
It was a requirement in 9th grade to
Yes,
take
it
home
was.
ec.
I know.
Yeah.
And now is it not? Is it,
don't think
maybe
so.
they require them to do like DoorDash training or something? I don't know.
I like
How
it.
to call
I like it.
reservations.
Can you go to a restaurant, pick it up, and bring it somewhere? Maybe that's home ec
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. What's interesting, those jobs that were designed to kind of be like the filler college, high school, even jobs, maybe
Right.
not DoorDash, but
Yeah.
similar like McDonald's or Taco Bell and some of those other things, I did weird things as well.
Sure.
But now are like complete careers for people.
Right.
It's very interesting how that pendulum has swung that direction right now.
Yeah.
Will there and people in college, they're like, we're so overwhelmed we can't work. I mean, you hear that, you see that all the time everywhere.
I had 3 jobs. I always was working full-time 40 hours as a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah, we've become so soft.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yes.
Looking at I'm glad that you brought this up. I like when people say, hey, let's talk about this. I love that because that's passion then.
Sure.
I love talking about things like this, especially right now, because one of the things that the COVID situation brought to the forefront is a lot of the public school curriculum.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people are probably like I'm starting to trigger them right now, and hopefully they can work through their trauma. But
You'll have to pay for counseling.
I know. I say that tongue in cheek, but the reality of it is that was a really good thing in my opinion. Some areas were like, hey, this is really, really bad. Some of the things that are happening, the curriculum. What was disturbing for me is in the public school, which is supposed to be very transparent.
Yep.
They've gone to great lengths to hide and not. Parents have come in and said, "Hey, we want to see what this is,"
Right.
and they're like, "No." When you have a public scenario like that, when they're supposed to be there for the people and they tell you no,
Right.
I am going to wonder what in the world's going on,
What's being
and I
hidden.
will make darn sure that I'm involved in helping people expose what that is, because that is a public institution, period.
I
If you're going to
believe
show
that,
it to my kids, you can show it to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I believe that has become maybe a lost conversation, that they don't, do they realize who pays for these institutions, these schools? Maybe that's the wrong word, but we the people are paying for these public schools to be in operation.
But you got to consider some of the mindsets that we're talking about. And the
Yeah.
reason I say this is so most people that watch know that I ran for city council in Rochester a couple years ago. And one of the conversations that always came up was the Alton Hills Bridge. And they said, well, we need to wait for the federal money to come to help pay for the bridge. And I said, where do you think the federal money comes from? That's our money.
Yes.
Whether it's federal, state, or local, it's still our money. And we still need to be mindful of how it's spent and spent appropriately.
Right.
And you just see the pet projects that happens at some of our public schools. And we toured a private school in Rochester a couple years ago when my daughter was 3, and you can see in that school that they were prioritizing on the kids and the learning and not the Taj Mahal of the school.
Sure.
And there's 2 schools being built in Rochester right now, and there's been comments on the new elementary school. They have some of it wrapped in copper. Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
the only house I've ever dealt with wrapped in copper was in Aspen, Colorado.
Yeah.
And why would they do that though?
Well, the long-term maintenance is minimal.
Okay.
But most schools aren't around for 100 years. So that's
Right.
kind of a moot point. You look at any government building, and they're all Taj Mahals.
Sure.
What's interesting?
Bad use of funds.
Yeah. I've been to Ireland, Italy, China, Spain, and I don't say that to like, ooh, look at me. What that shows is when you have conversations with people in other countries and they come and visit your country.
Yeah.
One of the conversations I had in Spain was with a gentleman. He said, when I was visiting and driving around, you could always tell what building was a government building.
Wow.
You could always tell. And I'm like, you're right.
It's not a good look.
That's not a good look.
No, it's not.
And it's not because it looks like a pole building.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like, oh, yeah, that's a government building. That's a government building. Whether it be a school or whether that be a city hall or whether that be any of those things. And it's like they all have that signature that this is, it's nicer than it needs to be, frankly.
Sure.
Not always.
Yeah. We're trying to promote thought and creativity, and it's like, so go look at Schaefer Academy. That was built for, my understanding, was built to be Schaefer Academy. It's not a Taj Mahal for a building. It's a very simple, clean, built affordably building because they had to watch the dollars and the pennies.
Right.
So
Right.
now, granted, the new Lourdes High School is pretty nice, but there's a lot of private funding and private donations to do that.
Well, and schools are kind of crying right now that we are like they don't have enough in their budget. And I'm like, but I thought that you had federal funding. So where does that come in to play? Can you use federal funding to fix your balance of your budget, or is that just the federal funding specifically for certain areas of spending?
Well, RPS is going to use COVID cash to balance their budget of like $9 million.
Yeah. I think they got 38 million at one point.
Because they've lost 800 students a year for the last 2 years. That's 1,600 students they're not getting paid for. No wonder their budget's short. That's a lot of students gone.
Was it 800?
800 this year and last year.
Wow.
That's a lot of students.
It's interesting how they've framed that, though. I was reading about that. You brought that up a while ago, and I dug into it a little bit more. And my recollection was the way that RPS framed it is that they had gained like 400 students, but they didn't say that there were. So that's like
lost.
Yeah.
So there's 1,200 left. And they gained 400, so it was a net loss.
Exactly. So it's a net loss, but they framed it as 400 new students moved. And I'm like, you had to dig for that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons that I decided to do this particular podcast is like, let's look in between let's look at the white space in between the letters and the words and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And figure out what's going on here.
Well, why do people choose to do of the three options, or maybe there's more options? Why do they choose? I mean, is that what we need to talk about?
Yeah, no, we are getting a little bit off on it, but I think it exposes why public school has suffered as much as they have, why homeschool has taken off. I think homeschool, the way I understand it too, is it's a whole network now. Yeah. Whereas there's sports, there's all of it. Talk about that a little bit.
So when I was homeschooled, the superintendent still allowed for homeschoolers to be involved in sports, you could even attend a science class, art class, choir, band, all of it. You really could come in, pick which ones you wanted to attend, and they would let you. I really think it benefited them financially, because if they were partial attenders, in that way, they would get some part of funding for that student attending there. Maybe similar to post-secondary. So a student's going to maybe go half the day at a public school and maybe half the day at the college for their last couple of years, which I really think that's wonderful too, to kind of, some kids are what you would maybe say advanced. Like this one size fits all is just where, we probably have failed a bunch of our kids. And grandparents, great-grandparents will talk about the one-room schools. Well, I've taught my kids
But it wasn't.
those.
Wasn't a one-room mentality.
No.
In other words, they would teach general. My grandfather talked about it too.
Yep.
They would teach general to the entire class, but there were all these different grades, right?
Yes.
So then they would start. The teacher would go and work individually with the students for the rest of the day, right? And so that's huge.
There's a curriculum called Weaver, I believe. We haven't used it, but it's that thing where some families have 6 kids or 8 kids. Maybe you just have 3, but you're having to teach them all at once because you can't spend 10, 12 hours every day in little sections with these kids. So they weave it all together as one big group, and then they have their individual work sheets or stuff at their level. So it's kind of cool.
It sounds like it's needs probably more needs a brighter light shown on it, right?
Sure.
I mean, most people don't know. I had to read more about it to
Yeah.
understand and learn it. I don't have kids in school either, so that's
Sure.
part of it. But one of the things that how can we do that? Like, how can we? Public school was exposed through COVID,
Sure.
frankly. How do we look at the homeschool and private school? What advice do you have there?
So,
Because I don't know
yeah.
anything. You're involved in it.
I am.
currently.
I have a lot of friends who are their kids or high school age kids or even elementary age kids are attending private schools, and they like that because they feel like their voices are heard more directly because it's a smaller setting most of the time. A lot of the homeschool families, honestly, so many people text me that first spring, March, April, May of 2020 saying, how on earth have you educated your kids? Because they were doing the online from home schooling with their kids. All of a sudden, like everybody, all these moms and dads are having to help their kids get on the little screens with the teachers and get their homework turned in. And they were so overwhelmed. They said, how do you do that? Well, it wasn't just an overnight thing. Like they had to experience really quite a shock and trauma, if we're being honest, because it's like you don't know how to ride a bike and you're expected to. So they had to figure out how to educate their kids. You know, it was like a job. The stacks of paper could come in and they have to teach their kid, and what a shocker that would be. So we just took it in stride, and honestly we just let the kids help the neighborhood kids experience what they were experiencing. So if they had, you know, when the neighbor kids would be done with their online school, they would come knocking on the door. They knew we were home because they all just know, and we just let them hang. And then if the kids had days off, we let our kids have a day off of school. And we've tried to do that actually a lot over all these years that we've home educated, just to get the socialization, right?
It's very important.
And so that the neighborhood kids didn't think that we're weirdos, because we're not. We're just, we have family.
Embrace the weirdness.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, I've learned to do it. Everybody can.
And really, it's like not everybody's family situations are the same.
And that's great.
And it's good.
Yeah.
And we have family in all kinds of different states in the U.S. So for us, homeschooling was such a great fit. So we could take it with us and go see them and spend time, because life just goes by way too fast.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to sit for 10, 12 years and just not let my kids get out and do anything just because I got to get them through these books and I got to, you know, we didn't take it that way. And we went on trips with these kids to like Philadelphia. We've been to, I mean, that's just one, just real rich places where there's history in our country or really amazing things to see. I mean, we have not gone to the Grand Canyon, which I'm really trying. Just for them to see what's out there is so important to make them a well-rounded person.
Yeah.
Experience the world.
Because then they have to talk to people that they don't even know while we're out at these places, right?
Yeah.
Restaurants or museums or whatever. And it's very good for them, I think.
I agree.
So.
I completely agree.
So people can't say, in my opinion, that you have to only go to this certain type of school because they're going to be socially weird. Well, maybe you could actually look at homeschooling and say, my kids were actually put in a lot more situations where they had to talk to people, not just these same 10 to 20, 30 kids that they actually know, like repetitively, right? Mm-hmm. So they actually were around a lot more strangers and a lot more just experiences than they maybe would have had at the repetitive. I love repetition and keeping things good and organized, but it was on the fly kind of stuff is great for people too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Craig, what do you got?
I want to circle back to one of the things that that was intentional.
Okay, Jen.
To one of the things that you said, and that was the private schools are more receptive to listening to the parents. And I think that's very important. And here's why I think that happens is because if the private schools aren't listening to their students and their parents, and also known as the people that are paying their salaries,
Sure.
the parents are going to pull their kids out of those schools and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think that's been lost in our public schools because they just assume that tax money is guaranteed.
There's a real
Right.
sense of accountability
Absolutely.
in that.
It's true.
Yes.
It's,
And
it's
and
like
maybe
losing-
that's what's happening right now with RPS is,
Yeah.
crap, if we're not going to satisfy these parents, they're going to pull their kids. And I don't know if this is exclusive to RPS or if this is happening all over the state or the country. I hope it is, because it's the only way that our public schools will improve is if they start taking accountability and stop teaching to take tests and start teaching
Yes.
to teach,
Right.
Yeah.
to educate.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have podcasts, conversations for the
Yeah.
next month on this stuff, but
Yeah.
Right.
it's interesting that you had made that comment
Yeah.
because I've felt that way for a long time.
Sure.
So
Hey, this was good.
Yeah.
This was, I learned a lot. Thank you.
you'll have to come back next week.
Yeah. Next
Or
week.
how about tomorrow? Thanks for joining us. Hammer the like button, hammer the share button, and make sure that you give us some good ratings if you like the show. If not, leave us alone, go somewhere else. Just kidding. See you next time. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this conversation that I just had. I was very honored to be a part of it, honored to be the host of This Matters in Real Life. I think it's extremely important to cover a lot of different things and topics and get people's opinions. When my daughter died in the car crash 10 years ago, I said that's what I would do. I would look at the answers, I would look at the truth, and I would make sure that they would intersect. They would not divorce each other. It's so often that we want answers that are not the truth. We want answers that are comfortable. We want answers that make us feel good. Well, there's a lot of things in life that is just, it's not the case. So who am I? Well, I am you. I'm no different than you are. I eat and sleep and, all the different things. Same thing that you do. I hurt. I feel joy. I've had a lot of experience, probably just like you. I work hard, probably just like you. One of the things that you can do to support us is go to shinybrandmerch.com, where you'll see things like the sweatshirt that I have on. I work. I'm a full-time, a truck driver. What do I deliver? Well, I deliver trucks. It's a little bit different of a gig than a normal truck driver, yes, but I am what would be considered a commercial vehicle transport specialist. So about 5 to 6 days a week, I deliver trucks. I get into a truck, I go 2,000 miles, I deliver it to its new owner, I get on an airplane and I go find another one. Nothing real glamorous unless you make it that way. And I've decided that I would have a lot of conversations along the way, and some of those conversations I'll be able to share with you. Again, hey, thanks for your support. Appreciate you. We'll see you next time.